Last week we took a look at the BMW Z4 E85. This week we pitch it against its predecessor, the BMW Z3. Two 6-cylinder motors, two BMW two-seater roadsters. Which is the best? The classic 90s or the mid-2000s? Two great cars, one decision. Welcome to Fast and Fun. Some of you will be absolutely aware that I'm looking at, and I've been looking at selling my Z3 for the last few months. I bought it last year. I've run it for just under a year now, and it's probably about time to move on. And I've not been its biggest fan, it has to be said. Last week, in part one of this, I reviewed the E85, and if you want to see that video, then check that up here. That's part one to this video. So, but what I want to do is compare them, and there's nothing like getting the two cars on the same day, the same bit of road, and driving up and down and getting a feel for the differences. And although these are two cars that in theory should be very similar, same manufacturer, same style of car, same type of engine, okay, same driver, same conditions, and only one generation between them, there was a few surprises when I took these two head to head. First of all, let's have a, as I normally do, let's have a walk around the cars. First of all, weights of the cars. The Z4 is a little bit of porker, 1360 kg. The Z3 is 1270. So it's about 90 kilograms, which is about it's a grown adult man's worth of weight the Z4 is carrying. The clamshell bonnet. So the whole of this front bonnet goes up, including, so there's not really any front wing per se on the Z3, whereas the Z4 is more of a traditional bonnet with front wings. So, and then if we go between the cars, this will be easier to see. One of the key features I loved on my Z3 was these shark fin vents here. Some are in chrome, some are in the paint colour, but I just like the styling of those. They went for the Z4 and they replaced them with what can only be described as a flipping ugly duckling of a side indicator light, which I don't particularly like. I don't know why they didn't keep with those vents, which really worked a treat. And as you step further back, where the Z3 just had or the later Z3s had the integrated brake light in the boot itself, there was nothing special per se about the boot, whereas with the Z4 they evolved probably one of the nicest features for me, which is the ducktail spoiler, and that pinched bum there with the integrated brake light in the top of it just makes it really stand out, really nice. But it is a little bit subjective for me. Z3 is the curvier car, it's the more rounded car, it's got the curvy edges, it's trying to be whereas the Z4 is more angular, edgy, almost like it's been chiselled shape compared to the curvy nature of the Z3. Inside there is an absolute vast difference. The Z3 traditional BMW, standard traditional dials with your rev counter and your speedo, and then very functional, very BMW-esque centre console, gear stick, etc., reminiscent of what you'd expect really on the sort of the 80s, 90s type of cars. Z4 was much more different. That one's got the recessed rev counter and speedo there that's recessed into two little pods, and then a minimalistic, really simple, very non-BMW looking centre dash really. Whereas the seats here on the older Z3, they're hard wearing, but they're that really slippy, shiny type of material. Whereas in the Z4 is much more softer. It's not as hard, it's not as abrasive, it's not as slippy. On the Z3 I slip around. The Z4, because it's got these extra lumbar supports here, is a much more secure, snug fit, rather than the slippy, slidey Z3. More so than any other type of car, two-seater roadsters, it really is important the way they look. And I know looks is very subjective, but there's certainly a big step change from the original Z3. Very curvy, very rounded. Everything had curves and sweeps and swoops and widened bodies, but there was no straight line anywhere. It was all curves, all trying to be smooth. And whereas the Z4 was much more chiselled, it was much more hard-edged, very lines, like it'd been cut out of granite or rock. So two very different ways of making the Roadster look. For me, I just love the Z3 lines. I think the Z3 curves wins it over the Z4. Values is a really interesting one, because for people that look in here, they will look at the more modern Z4 and think that's a much more expensive car. But in truth, it's not the case. You look on Auto Trader and you'll now see you're in that unique position. The Z3 has reached 20 to 25 years old. That's when cars tend to bottom out. Some will become beyond economic repair, go off the road. Others, the best ones, will start appreciating in value. Still, while the Z4s are dropping in value. And we've got to that unique position now that the Z3 is more expensive than the Z4s. Unbelievably, if you're happy with the 4-pot Z4, there's some on Auto Trader for £2,000. And incredible. Even if you want 6-cylinder, they're not much more expensive. Probably 3k will get you into a 6-cylinder Z4. So suddenly these are absolute competitors now. Maybe 5-10 years ago they weren't, because the Z4 would have been much more expensive. But those days have gone now. For the sake of a few £1,000s, you could be driving in one of these two cars. I've been switching between the Z3 and the Z4 on and off all afternoon, going up and down the same bits of road, going through the same corners, sometimes pushing on, sometimes just gently driving, to get a feel for these two cars, to pitch them absolutely together. You've got to expect the Z4, it's going to feel that little bit newer, and it should drive that little bit better. Incremental improvements year on year, but well, from inside you can't believe that the Z4 E85 followed the Z3, because it feels so much more modern than this. This is classic BMW. Don't get me wrong, I like it, but it's dated. You know you're in an older car. And the driving position, I feel like I'm noddy driving the little comic car. I feel like I'm just sat on top of the car. I know I'm not, but it feels like I'm sat 6 inch higher. My eye line's almost in line with the top of the windscreen. I can't see the top of the dials. The ergonomics are just so flipping wrong, and I'm just sliding everywhere. The car doesn't ride properly. It twitches, it rolls. It's too direct. The slightest camber or pothole knocks it offline. It still feels well built. In fact, you could argue that although it's all worn more because it's an older car, It perhaps feels just that little bit stronger, just that little bit more screwed together, just that little bit more robust in its build quality. And I've got to say, the 2.2 litre six-cylinder, it's down 450 brake. It's 450. It's down 45 brake horsepower, but it doesn't feel 45 brake horsepower slower. Not at all. It really just eggs you to rev it and rev it right up through the rev range, and it goes remarkably well. And I would argue it sounds just as good as the 2.5. And the gearbox, I think, it's better. It's not great, it's not the best gearbox I've ever used, but I actually think it's marginally better than the Z4's. The Z4, when I was using it, just felt at times a little bit rushed, a little bit notchy. As soon as you want to do a few quick gear changes, didn't encourage you to want to change gear too often, because it's a little bit notchy, a little bit fiddly. This gearbox, yeah, it certainly changes gears better. And I've got to say, the looks. The Z4 might be the newer car, but the Z3, I love it. I love the front of the Z3. I love the clamshell bonnet. I love the side vents, the chrome side vents. I think the Z4 just looks a bit, well, just a bit difficult. Like they were trying a little bit too hard. But in truth, whichever of these cars, the Z3 or the Z4, comes out top, one thing it does prove, that people that diss them as being just hairdressers' cars, and whether that's the Z3, Z4, MX-5, SLK, Boxster, whatever, days like today, the sun's shining, it's high 20s, it's absolutely great weather, then, do you know, you can take the piss, you can say whatever you want about being hairdressers' cars. Today, this precise moment now, I wouldn't rather be in any other car than a two-seater, open-top Roadster. Absolutely fantastic. So I've jumped out of the Z3 and I jump into the Z4 now. It feels like I've not gone up one evolution. It feels like a whole generation or two that we've missed. You don't realise the step change between both cars. The Z3 feels like an old-fashioned 80s or 90s Roadster. This feels far, far more modern. And I would say it's aged far better than the Z4. It's cleaner, it's such a more refreshing inside. But where the Z4 nails it compared to the Z3, there's a real issue with the Z3 for me. You feel like you're sat on it, the steering wheel's too low, I can't see the dials, I'm sat too high, I slide around in the seat. All those issues that I've got with the Z3 have all been rectified in this car. This driving position, I sit in the car, the dials are where I want them, the steering wheel maybe a little bit thick, but it's in the right place. And the seats, they've got enough lumbar support. In fact, they probably get the balance of comfort and support just about right. So everything that the Z3 didn't do, the Z4 is. And other than not having the classic looks of BMW, the Z4's got the driving position inside absolutely nailed. Going along broken, potholed, cambered roads, it's far from perfect. It does twitch a bit, it does get moved around a little bit, but compared to the Z3, it's a step above. Where the Z3 gets knocked about, feels on edge all the time, the Z4, even with the large alloys, can soak it, can absorb it, can ride it. The quality of the ride is a step above the Z3's. The engines, well, yeah, this has got a far more powerful engine. 45 brake horsepower more than the 170 from the Z3's 2.2. You wouldn't necessarily know there's 45 brake horsepower in it. Both engines are silky smooth, they both rev really, really well, and it's probably the highlight of the Z3, whereas for the Z4, because it's a better all-round car, you don't notice it as much. The one place the Z3 has gone over the Z4 is weight. The Z4 is a bit of a porker. It's carrying 90 kilos, so almost one of me extra in weight, and that does blunt the performance. So it does need the more powerful engine to keep it up to the Z3's standard. And although the Z4 steering, I've argued, is a little bit vague, you're a little bit numb, the Z3's is poor. It really is poor. Now, whether that's some of mine's down to my tired suspension on the Z3, I don't know. But it's, Jesus. So it appears then the Z4's got the beating of the Z3. Well, you see, I bought the Z3 because I love the way it looked. And even today, I still prefer the way the Z3 looks. It's got the Z4 beat, for me, all hands down. And I knew the inline-six engines are great in both cars. But ultimately, you buy a BMW because you want it to be the ultimate driving machine. And unfortunately for me, the Z4 beats the Z3 hands down. Whether that's everyday practicality of just driving along in the countryside, roof down at 7/10, or it's revving the little monkeys out of your engine and the car on the limit at 9/10 down some great country roads, the Z4 has got the Z3 beat hands down. And the biggest surprise for me during this review and comparison is by the margin. It's absolutely huge. The Z4 hasn't just won and beat the Z3, it's absolutely annihilated it. If this was a boxing match, this is a knockout. The Z4 is, without any question, the best car. And for me, that's a bit of a disappointment considering I own a Z3. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, thumbs up, subscribe, stay tuned. Another video next week. Thanks for watching.